Ever feel like you're constantly trying to like level up your personality, like you're stuck in this never-ending game of better, faster, stronger, but with, yourself?
Oh, totally. It's like everyone's chasing after the perfect version of themselves, right?
Exactly. And that's exactly what today's deep dive is all about. We're diving into uh, Reflections, Releasing All Masks. It's by Pedro Elias.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of you are wrestling with this whole authenticity thing. And getting to the heart of Elias's argument, he's saying that real freedom, like true freedom, comes when you ditch the whole perfecting yourself thing.
It's funny when you think about it. We're so used to the self-improvement stuff, like hustle harder, be more mindful, that kind of thing. But Elias really flips the script.
He really does. And get this, he actually compares this whole self-improvement obsession to, get this, trying to outrun the flu.
The flu, okay, now I'm intrigued.
Right. So think about it. We see those kind of messy parts of ourselves, like when we get insecure or we're frustrated or whatever, and we're like, gotta fix that. Like it's a bug in the system.
It's like we're programmed to think those feelings are bad, something's wrong with us if we have them.
Yeah, exactly. But Elias is saying, what if those feelings, those flaws, are just part of being human? Just like, well, getting the flu now and then.
Okay, that's a pretty radical way to think about it.
It is. So in the piece, Elias talks about the paradox of modern self-improvement. What's your take on that?
It's like we've gotten rid of some of those old school pressures, like, needing to fit into some perfect mold of success. But have we? Or have we just replaced them with a new set of pressures? Like now it's all about optimizing every single part of your life.
It's like pressure from a million different directions now, right?
Yeah.
Biohacking your breakfast, side hustling on the weekends, and don't even get me started on social media.
Right. You've got to have the perfect Instagram feed, the witty tweets, the whole 9 yards. It's exhausting.
Totally. And that's what I find so interesting about what Elias is saying. We have more freedom than ever to be ourselves, but we end up feeling trapped by this need to be, well, perfect.
And that's the paradox, isn't it? We're so busy trying to fit into all these different molds, these different versions of ourselves, that we lose sight of who we actually are underneath it all.
It's like we've traded one set of masks for another. Instead of company man, it's peak performance CEO. And honestly, when Elias started talking about the whole personal growth movement, I was a little taken aback.
I can see why, but I don't think he's saying all self-improvement is bad. It's more about being aware of how we're using it. Are we using these techniques for genuine growth or just to build a more impressive facade?
So it's not about ditching the tools, but being mindful of our intentions.
Exactly. Are we meditating to connect with ourselves or just to check another box on our to-do list? Are we drawn to that new productivity hack because it actually resonates with us or because everyone else is doing it?
It's like we're so busy chasing the next level of self-improvement that we miss out on actually experiencing our lives.
And that's where Elias's perspective gets really interesting. And maybe a little radical.
So Elias is saying that instead of running from all those, kind of messy emotions, we should just like lean into them. That's pretty wild.
It is a different way of looking at things, right? Like we're conditioned to think we need to fix those parts of ourselves.
Right. And he even calls this raw, unfiltered part of ourselves our inner presence, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it's like he's saying there's this deeper part of us that just wants to be seen. No filters, no masks, just like radical acceptance.
I like that radical acceptance.
Yeah.
So it's not about achieving some like perfectly enlightened state. It's more about stripping away all the BS and just being real with ourselves.
Exactly. And that can be scary, right? Because we're so used to hiding behind those masks.
Oh, for sure. It's way easier to just project some perfect image than to actually be vulnerable and let people see the real you.
It is. And I think that's what Elias is getting at, that there's this real freedom in embracing those imperfections. Because when we can accept those parts of ourselves, it frees us from that need for external validation.
Like we're so used to seeking approval from others that we forget to check in with ourselves. Like, what do I think? What feels true for me?
Right. And Elias would say that that's where true fulfillment comes from. Not from adding more to our plates, more accomplishments, more goals, but from letting go of that need to prove ourselves.
Letting go, you mean just like surrendering to the moment?
In a way, yeah. Letting go of the need to control everything, to be perfect. And this idea of embracing our authentic selves, it's something that resonates across so many different cultures and philosophies.
It's like a universal truth or something. So going back to the flu metaphor, how does Elias suggest we actually handle those, negative emotions? If we're not trying to outrun them, what do we do with them?
He uses this really great image Imagine those feelings, those moments of self-doubt or whatever, as just weather patterns, but like in the landscape of our
Weather
minds.
patterns in the landscape of our minds. Wow, I like that.
It's a good one, right? And just like a storm, those feelings might feel intense in the moment, but they'll pass. They always do.
So instead of freaking out, we just ride the wave, knowing that the sun will eventually come out again.
Exactly. And that, Elias would say, is how we cultivate self-compassion. Instead of beating ourselves up for having a bad day, we can just acknowledge those feelings and treat ourselves with kindness.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But, and maybe this is just me, but it seems way easier said than done, It's one thing to talk about accepting our flaws, but actually living it. That feels like a whole other level.
Oh, absolutely. Elias isn't saying this is easy. In fact, he'd be the first to say that this whole process of releasing our masks, it's not a one-time fix. It's an ongoing practice.
Okay, so no quick fixes. So where do we even begin? So Elias talks about becoming aware of our masks as a starting point. What does that even look like in real life?
Well, it starts with paying attention, like noticing those times when you feel that urge to like put on a certain face for the world.
Like in a work meeting, you mean? Or like on a first date?
Yeah, exactly. Or even with like close friends or family. Are there situations where you find yourself kind of like adjusting your behavior to fit in or whatever?
And then what? You ask yourself why you're doing that.
Right. Why this mask in this moment? What are you hoping to get out of it?
Ooh, that's a good question. So we're digging into the motivation behind the mask, not just the mask itself.
Totally, because once you understand the why, you can start to figure out if those masks are actually serving you, or if they're just keeping you stuck.
Stuck in like a performance of yourself instead of the real deal.
Exactly. It's like that quote, the privilege of a lifetime is being who you truly are. But it's like, how do we even know who that is when we're so used to all these masks?
All right, like where do we even begin to unpack all that?
Well, Elias doesn't give us like a step-by-step guide or anything because, like we've been talking about, there's no one right way to be authentic.
Makes sense. It's a journey, not a destination.
Right. Exactly. But he does give us some good pointers, some things to keep in mind as we're figuring this stuff out. Like he talks about paying attention to how those masks make you feel.
Oh, interesting. So like if a certain role or identity leaves you feeling kind of icky or drained, that's a sign something's off.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're constantly forcing yourself to be someone you're not, it's going to catch up with you eventually.
It's like wearing shoes that are too tight. You can only stand it for so long. So it's all about checking in with yourself. Like, hey, how am I actually doing under here?
Totally. And if something doesn't feel right, it's probably a sign that it's time to, maybe try on a different size.
You know?
Or ditch the shoes altogether.
So we're not talking about like a complete personality makeover here.
No, not at all. It's not about becoming someone totally different. It's more about peeling back those layers, all the expectations and beliefs that we've picked up along the way and getting to the heart of who we already are.
Right, because then it's just another mask, right? Like,
At
oh,
all.
now I have to be the perfect picture of authenticity.
Exactly. There's no perfect way to do this. It's about embracing all of it, the messy, imperfect parts too, because those are the things that make you, well, you.
And isn't that what people connect with anyway? Like the realness,
Yeah,
not some idealized version of a person.
totally. When you're willing to be vulnerable and show your true colors, it gives other people permission to do the same. And that's where real connection happens.
It's like true freedom comes from embracing all of yourself, flaws and all.
And that's a powerful message, right? Like, what if we stopped chasing after some perfect version of ourselves and just focused on showing up as we are?
Right here, right now. I love that. So to wrap up our deep dive today, I think a good question for our listeners to ponder is, if you could release just one mask, just one expectation you put on yourself, what would it be?
That's a good one. Something to think about.
It really is. And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into reflections, releasing all masks. Remember, authenticity isn't about being perfect. It's about being present.